Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About, a series spotlighting leaders, artists, authors, marketers, creators, and entrepreneurs sharing tips and tricks and expert advice on business, media, technology, and frankly, life itself. I'm your host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, Forbes contributor, investor, and advisor. Today we're talking to Sam Budd, CEO of Buddy Media. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
So I really want to go in. We've got a bunch of things we're going to talk about for sure, which are, I think, very unique to the audience. And I think they're going to hear these things for the first time about how you've developed your organization, your company, and the kinds of things that you do. But I really want to take a step back and kind of bring them to the background and how did you get to where you are with Buddy Media?
God, it's been a long, long road. I think any founder or leader in a business knows how hard it is.
Yeah.
And I think, Elon Musk always talks about starting a business is like eating glass and staring into the abyss.
Yeah.
But actually, there's some incredible elements to it, and a lot of that's culture, energy, and passion. I actually grew up in Bristol and then moved to Cornwall. And I got my first job actually working for a music festival called Beach Break Live, very focused on how to interact and connect and make people feel, certain emotions and euphoria essentially. And what I realized within that time is how much I loved the opportunity to connect and like deeply provide meaning to people through different moments, activations. From working at Beach Break Live, we actually built a student brand manager model that was so effective that it ended up becoming its own business, which was Seed Marketing Agency. So I'm sure you've heard of like the Red Bull student brand manager
Yeah,
programs.
sure.
We actually pioneered and created the Spotify student brand manager program. And again, that ended up taking me into a new realm of marketing as opposed to events and like really starting to work with brands and thinking about how brands are speaking and engaging with customers. What was really unique about Seed Marketing, it was very focused on experiential marketing and in real life moments. But as the trend, like this is going back nearly 10 years now, as the trend started to evolve with social media
Hmm.
and much kind of more viral moments, I ended up coming across a guy called Steve Bartlett, which I'm sure you're aware of from Social Chain, and Dom, the founders of Social Chain. And they ended up bringing me into their business to help them kind of integrate both in real life and social into kind of one holistic offering. That was probably one of the most incredible and stressful journeys I've ever
Yeah.
been on. I think I was about 25 years old when I joined. The average age was around about 22 years old for the company, which was incredible for creative and social
Mm-hmm.
strategy, but a total minefield for trying to get people to follow process and the kind of basics. Um, we ended up having a pretty rapid growth. I think I joined when there was about 27 people, ended up scaling that out into Germany and then eventually launching out into the US, which was a total eye opener in terms of scale, speed, the way that they approach things. And so I think by the time I left Social Chain, about 2.5 years later, there was about 200 people across three different markets. Um, we were working with some of the biggest brands in the world, and I was actually then operating as a managing director out in the US. And so I was really starting to understand about P&Ls and board
Mm-hmm.
updates and actually how to run a business. What was really interesting is I think when you are expanding your career and going down different paths of responsibility, you have this kind of naive assumption that when you're doing it under the support of a wider umbrella like Social Chain, you kind of know it, you know what to do. Which I was very shocked by when I launched Buddy, because I went in and effectively the first client that we had was Apple. And we had to build infrastructure. We had to kind of launch with no funding, and
Yeah.
all the kind of key mistakes that I thought I wouldn't make, I did.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I came from in terms of my career. In terms of kind of a personal perspective, I I've definitely kind of had a quite unique upbringing in terms of, you know, having to kind of face and deal with quite a lot of alcoholism and kind of a disrupted family background. And I think what that instilled in me is like a deep need to prove myself and to drive forward and achieve and constantly kind of push myself. And so I think that's probably one of the key things that's kind of got me to where I am today.
Super interesting. And what's really special about Buddy Media? I mean, you bring a lot of great in real life plus social, working with big brands. What makes Buddy so special for the audience?
Um, I mean, the people, definitely. I think you do not have a business without really great people. And I think the culture within Buddy, it's filled with energy. Like we're kind of known as the energized agency with all of our clients, and we're constantly kind of trying to, ignite, like we call it lightning strikes with the creative ideas. Like we're constantly trying to find that idea that really catches fire. I think, from a core offering, like one of the things that I noticed with seed and social chain and in general, I think there's a challenge within the industry, um, within the marketing and social space in particular, is you can tell incredible stories and do amazing viral social moments, but actually often it falls down from an ROI
Yep.
perspective and it
Yeah.
doesn't deliver the results. And the amount of times I've been on calls with clients and said, hey, we've delivered you 10 million impressions or all of these engagement and reach, but actually there wasn't the kind of core bottom line sales that they
Mhm.
needed to be able to justify moving forward. And so I've actually built quite a unique model where I have a social team and like a social media marketing agency, but then I've also hired a number of key media based experts, so from PPC to paid social and kind of that element. And what our kind of core tagline is bridging the gap between creative and performance, because on the other side, the media agencies and all of
Yep.
these kind of like major media houses, whilst they're incredible at driving results, actually they often fall down with why, what is the
Right.
story that we're trying to tell? How do we want to
Right.
evoke emotion? And so, you know, I have to admit, trying to put media specialists
Mm-hmm.
alongside creatives and get them to kind of communicate and work collaboratively is much harder than you'd think. But
Mm-hmm.
over the last 3 to 4 years, that's been the kind of core thing that's allowed us to scale and achieve the success we have.
I mean, they speak a totally different language.
Oh yeah,
They're built differently. They speak a very different language. They don't always set,
operate.
yeah, and coming in, trying to bridge that gap in the middle is quite the challenge. I've faced that myself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you might have seen a couple of the awards that we've had over the last few years, but I think the big thing that Buddy are really kind of establishing a name for in the market is, how are we like genuinely impacting people beyond just selling a product? So
Hmm.
like what is it that we can position a brand to do that acts as a vehicle for that individual's success so that they can then resonate
Right.
with the brand as something that's genuinely positively supported them. And so we just did a campaign with Joe Wicks and Aviva last year, and one of the hardest things that we've done, I think, is convincing Aviva that we weren't focusing on the product. We were
Hmm.
actually focusing on how to get people happier, fitter, and healthier. And that movement and that byproduct ultimately ended up supporting their health proposition
Right.
within their business. And so I think if you were to work with Buddy, or if anyone wanted to come and work with Buddy as an employee, one of the key things we look for is like evoking emotion and asking the why and really thinking about the psychological aspects of why consumers buy and engage and love brands.
Mhm. I think that brings us to a really interesting point about psychology just in general. And this is something great for the audience. You brought in and have brought into your organization mental health and wellness inside of Buddy Media and actually hired an in-house psychologist. Why did you do that? And, what was the impetus for it?
Yeah, so I think it's been an incredible journey. And actually, what's quite hard is when you are driving growth and you're trying to follow certain blueprints and looking at all your kind of north stars that you're aspiring to kind of target. You can sometimes lose track of like what your core values are, and I
Hmm.
think particularly with like having to navigate some challenging times myself, one of the reasons why I have been able to not just build, a successful career, but a successful life, with people that I care about and people that I know I can turn up and be there for. And what that was is actually really focusing on myself, CBT therapy, doing lots of kind of psychological research and working and going to things like the Landmark Forum, which were like kind of mindfulness weekends to really kind of address all of the stuff that you should talk about, but you never do.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not a solved puzzle. It's a constant thing that you need to work at. But I think people
Hmm.
spend so long optimizing the business and the process and thinking about how they can kind of almost improve their fitness levels, which is a really important part of it. But I don't think there's enough focus on like how you can support your mind and like how you can learn to control negative thoughts or resilience is a massive part of business. It's something that in this world at the moment, with all of the wars and the geopolitical issues that are going on, and the COVID that we've just gone through off the, like
Hmm.
2 or 3 years ago.
Hmm.
These moments, life is hard, right? And
Yeah.
life hits you exactly at the time when you don't want it to. And actually, if you think about as a CEO, you have a team of people that you're reliant on and they're reliant on you to make sure that you're delivering success and they are operating in a happy successful way. And if their mental health goes and if their mindset shifts and it's negative, you can create toxic environments.
Yeah.
You can have people going off sick. You can ultimately really really negatively impact the business. And I'll be honest with you, Cynthia, we were so focused in our early years on driving growth and
Hmm.
achieving the next target. And,
Hmm.
again, navigating and fighting through the pandemic, because obviously I launched a business straight into a pandemic, which
Hmm.
was very interesting.
Hmm.
But, you know, if you are able to kind of really harness that, you can really reduce people going off sick. You can really improve the way that people turn up and communicate with each other. And so our culture actually got really impacted because I don't think there was any focus on that or enough focus on that. And we
Hmm.
didn't have
Hmm.
a solid plan and program, just like management training or leadership
Right.
development.
Right.
So I actually got connected with Ross Anderson, who is, essentially like a psychologist and well-being coach for kind of CEOs. And we were talking about, how I was struggling and the challenges that I was facing because it is a lonely road as a founder, particularly a sole founder.
Yeah.
And your job is to constantly address and try and fight the fires and the biggest problems day in and day out.
Mm.
And Ross said, he is really open to coming in and supporting Buddy, but actually we've got to start with you because typically the problems do stem
Hmm.
from the top, and
Yeah.
you need to think about how I'm turning up as a CEO and how I'm able to control my emotions and coping strategies. And so we went on a 6 month, we ended up agreeing to go on a 6 month program. It started with me. I had to fly up to Scotland, He calls it back to baseline, where you do a load of blood work, a VO2
Hmm.
max test, have a lot of therapy sessions and fitness tests, and the idea is that those results will give you the baseline of where you're at in your life, where your health is being impacted, your stress levels, your blood pressure, which mine was through the roof. And then the idea is that you set out a 6 month program for how we are going to systematically help improve myself. So that was stage one. And then stage two, and it was really quite interesting because one of the things that impacts a CEO and a founder, if they really care, which most 99% of people do, is the happiness and the success and the culture of the business
Yeah,
that you're leading and
definitely.
running. And so, you know, the next chapter was if I can turn up for myself, because it's, there's this great saying, it's like, instead of I'll look after you if you look after me, it's, I'll look after me if you look after you. And the
Hmm.
idea is that actually, if we can build a program and empower people to look after themselves, give themselves gratitude each day, encourage people to take time out and have moments where they just say I'm going to work from home, or I need a mental health day, um, that will eventually start really kind of seeping through and empowering the wider people within the
Hmm.
business. And I suppose the idea is that even though from a commercial perspective it was quite a significant, it's not something that a kind of fast growing startup typically would invest at that
Right,
level.
right.
It's usually a kind of larger scale corporation, and I had to kind of justify my approach with my FD, and I
Mm-hmm.
always have some very funny conversations with him, which I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
all the founders listening to this do. Um, but actually, the outcome from that was, in the last 12 months, we haven't had anyone leave the business, whereas before, it was a real issue of losing key talent. We've also massively improved the relationships that we have with the clients. And we've gone from having the highest percentage of new business to drive the growth of Buddy to actually the highest percentage of business development and growth off the back of that. And, if bar processes and great delivery, a lot of that comes down to how you connect, how
Yeah,
you take
completely.
feedback, how you actually have perspective instead of feel attacked or want to
Mm-hmm.
justify the side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just seen this absolutely profound impact on the way that we act and operate as a company and as human beings.
That's really amazing. What would be, because it is an unusual approach for a startup to do that, and invest in something like that so early on. But the burnout is real. For
Yeah,
anybody who's built a business, I mean, ours took, 10 years, right? We were very ahead of the curve, and the burnout and the self-doubt and the sleepless nights and the constant travel and it just piles and piles. And I realized later we didn't celebrate the small wins, even any of the big wins. We just kept going and kept going and kept going. And
yeah.
I didn't take
Beat
vacations
the
and
drum. Yeah,
didn't, meet up with friends and do things I should have done because I was so involved and wrapped up in that. And I, vowed that I would never, when we sold it, I vowed, like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never not being who I need to be and taking care of myself and my
yeah,
relationships the way I should, because it just, working 12, 15, 18 hours a day and answering emails at 3 o'clock does not make you a better executive, period. It makes you tired and burnt out, and staff hears it, and you're short with that. It just kind of cumulates. So if you were to give a piece of advice to startups out there or clients that you're working with, like what would that be based on the experiences that you've had?
so it's, I mean, I totally agree. And I've I regularly experience burnout, right? And burnout is
Yeah.
super important to make sure that you're really managing and being aware of. Again, another benefit of working with a psychologist or people that are really focused on you is that it can give you the tools to identify when you're starting to hit that so that you can kind of address it before the balloon bursts.
Mm.
I think what is difficult. I actually I was talking to someone the other day about burnout, and they were off like they often say that burnout often comes from repeatedly striving to achieve goals that are never achieved or broken
Mhm.
through. And actually,
Mhm.
often when things are going really well and things are organized and not chaotic, even though you're busy, you don't have that sense of like real exhaustion and
Mhm.
kind of spiraling thoughts. And I think that's something to be mindful of, because when burnout comes, it's often because something is broken in the way that you're operating and the way that you're approaching your personal and professional life. Um, I would say that as a founder, whilst it is so critical to focus on your well-being and self-care, um, there is an element of sacrifice that comes, particularly when you're launching. And I think
Yes.
that if I was to do this all over again, even in a different style or approach, I think there would still be the requirement to have those late nights from time to time,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
to work hard, like, well, work extremely hard. But what I do think is important is that if you are noticing those moments happening on a regular basis and
Yeah.
you're not checking in and you're not realizing it and you're not actually having a community and a support structure around you where people can be really honest with the way that they feel you are acting or operating or approaching situations, um, you, as you've said, you can end up really damaging the things that are the most important, and that is your friends, your family, your
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
And I think health is a massive one that we're not, we're not addressing enough, from stress and high blood pressure and the long
Yeah.
term impacts that has. And I think as I'm kind of getting older,
Mhm.
in my career, you also want to start thinking about a family and how you're going to look after your loved ones, and
Yeah.
so you know how are you going to do that, if you're working 80 to 100-hour weeks and
Yeah.
burn out. And so one of the things that I created, and I got help from one of my mentors, from Franco Rosolia, who's global head of Apple Music, is we built a happiness tracker
Mm.
on a spreadsheet. And the idea is that you can't always be 100%
Right.
on any of your
Right.
elements, but
Right.
every single person can write down 10 really key things that are important to them: their health, their finance, their family, their home, right? Their mental health, all of these
Right.
different elements. And every month, I measure it out of 100. And if certain ones drop below 70% or 60% in particular, I know that I need to then really reshift my focus, to
Yeah.
try and kind of enhance one or two areas to kind of holistically kind of bring me up. So I think the message I would give is, unfortunately, if you want to succeed and achieve, the success that so many people do, like yourself, like, I think there is sacrifice, and I think
Yeah.
burnout is inevitable. But it's about really building frameworks and support structures around you that can allow you to kind of recoup and catch your breath. And the holiday thing, Cynthia, like, I've had the same. I actually had my
Yeah.
first holiday since launching Buddy 5 years ago, where
Yeah.
I did not work for three
Yeah.
weeks when I
Yeah.
was away, and that did a massive amount of good.
Yeah. And it takes you a longer time to unwind when you go on those trips because you're so
Yeah,
wound into the business. It literally you're 4 days in and you just start relaxing. So
Yeah,
taking longer than a week is really a better guarantee of actually recouping and re-energizing and getting back to your a state of calm before you enter, the craziness of the startup world. So, for the audience, it's great advice. How do they get a hold of you if they want to work with you, talk to you, work for you? What's the best way?
so you can reach out to me directly at sam@buddymediagroup.com, or you can go to our website at www.buddymediagroup.com.
Thank you so much. I love your journey. I think it's an inspiration for, not just startups, but anybody who's out there working like crazy. And again, with the craziness in the world, I think we all need that mental health support and reassurance and, from friends and family to jobs and everything in between.
Amazing.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much
you
for
very
being on the show. Yeah, no, thank you.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Take care.